Orc Tactical Team.
Hey there guys, this is me and Malorian, and this will be another Orc Tactical Team. Now, what we're going to be talking about today is something that actually came out a little while ago, but still is bothering people. I thought I'd give this more time so we could see if there's going to be more developments, but there hasn't really been so far that I've seen. So I think now is a good time to actually talk about it. And what are we talking about? We're talking about the statement that Privateer Press is going to go forward with the design or the strategy of releasing a new faction every single year. This is something that was kind of said in one of the podcasts there, I believe it was in the Prime, where they kind of mentioned like, oh yeah, and there'll be a new faction every year, and well, wait a second. People said, well, let's get some clarification. What do you mean by that? And then Will Pagani came out and said, nope, that's true. We're going to release a new faction every single year. And yeah, everyone went crazy over it. And, you know, there's different types of crazy. There's the crazy excited saying this is awesome. We're going to see all these new factions. I wonder which one's next. And then there's the other side that's saying, what the hell are you thinking? This is the worst idea you could have possibly done. And then, of course, there's everything in between. So I thought it'd be good now, where we have no more information on this so far, but it's going to talk about the possible threats to the game, the possible impacts on yourself, and probably what's the best stance to take on this idea going forward. So to start off with, what is the impact on the game? Well, the first thing that's kind of hard to find is, what does a new faction even mean? Does it mean something like Grimkin? Or it's like a completely new faction and it's going to have everything going with it? Or something like Convergence? Or is it going to be something more like Cephalix and be more like a sub-faction, right? Right now we're kind of like they're covering and doing like the Trenchers. Is that what they're going to mean? Now, what I've seen and been able to draw a little bit is that they're leaning more towards the Convergent side and the Grimkin as being like, no, that's the new faction we're talking about. So that's what we're going to assume for this talk. So if we were to get a brand new faction like that every single year, well, what would that do to the game? Well, the first thing that people come to is like, well, this is just going to make it so that there's way more stuff for us to try. And remember, look at this. There's going to be all these different new casters, all these different new jacks, all these different units and solos. And of course, if this is a brand new faction, they're going to have all their brand new personal, niches and like little fancy specialties that we have to remember. For the Convergence, we had Induction and this weird stuff, and Jack's getting the same stats as their caster, and then for Grimkin, we got these weird non-feat feats. Well, what is this going to mean in the future? Now, I believe that argument there is somewhat valid. I mean, yes, there'll be a lot of new things to learn, but at the same time, you already kind of have that anyway. If you look over the course of the year and say all the things that are released over the course of a year, well, you're probably already looking like at a faction or more, right? With all the things that are released for typically all the other factions, we got a caster here, Jack's going across, like usually there's a War Machine thing and then a Hordes thing. If you add all these things together, well, that's already a lot of new stuff you gotta keep in mind. So I think that argument of saying there's all this new stuff you have to worry about, I don't think that's a valid argument, because that's the world we're living anyway. That's something we're already doing. Now, another argument that comes from this as well is that, well, if people are going, a Privateer Press, if they're going and releasing this new faction and putting all this effort into this new faction and releasing all this, well, what about me? What about all my stuff, right? I want to have new updates for my faction too. Does this mean now that I'm not going to really get anything? Maybe like one thing every couple of years? And there's no way of saying one way or the other. One could assume that since they're going and doing their effort and putting out this brand new faction, that then there won't be time, or as much time, to be releasing stuff for the standard main factions. But at the same time, there's nothing saying that's really the case. One of the things you could kind of say is that now that we have CID, Privateer Press has a little bit more wiggle room because they really have all of us as associates that are there to kind of help them through this process, right? When they're needing to do all this internal testing themselves, they're really limited to their own workforce. Now that they have CID and they can work with a lot of others, they can now themselves say like, all right, we got this new faction, it's called whatever, we're going to work on this, and then all the updates for all the main factions, okay, well, we don't have the time to fully flesh these things out, but let's put them through CID. And then that way we make sure we don't miss anything, well, you're helping us, and we get all these things out at the same time. Is that what they're going to do? I have no idea. However, I'm also very certain they're not going to say like, all right, that's it, nothing new for Signar. This just doesn't sound like, you know, Privateer Press and their dream baby Signar. So you got to know that the main factions are still going to be getting things. So even though that seems like a logical concern, at the same time, I don't feel that's going to be a main one either. So here's another one. Another concern is that if you're putting all these things out, well, you're just going to run out of design space, right? If you got this hashtag design space and we're making all these cool new things, well, we're just going to go to the same spot now where we run out of new things we can do. Well, you know, that's always been a real worry about War Machine, right? If you are in a system where you are continually rolling out new things and trying to find new areas, eventually you start running out of new areas. This is something we've been talking about since Mark 1, right? Where the idea is that you can only put out like, okay, this time we're going to give you a new epic caster. Oh, we've done epic casters. Now there's going to be character jacks. Oh, we've done battle engine casters. You know, like there's only so many new areas you can go. And so if that was a concern before, it's still really the same concern now. Sure, we might be getting there faster, but that's something that we're already kind of going towards in this game, and it's its own unique problem. In fact, this might be answered in a different way, which is again, CID. If we're trying to go and avoid this mess in the first place, well, maybe the answer is that for all these main factions, they already have a lot of models, maybe instead of releasing new stuff for them, well, maybe every year we CID a handful of them, right? The top 5% and the bottom 5% for every faction, and we start saying, all right, Constance, you suck, what can we do to make you better? Okay, and at the same time, hey Sloan, you're pretty freaking awesome, what can we do to bring you a little bit more down in line? And then all of a sudden, if you're doing that, each faction is kind of getting their own little thing, and they can keep on going with the main faction at the same time. Is that the best way to go? I don't know, but it's an option. And I mean, the main thing here is that if you are making the argument that a new faction a year is bad because of how we're going to run out of design space, I still feel that that's also invalid because that's a problem with the process and the general strategy that Privateer Press has gone with anyway, right? It's not Games Workshop where they say every couple of years, buy this new book as we reinvent the same things. You know, we'll take the same stuff we always had before and just reinvent them and make you re-buy the book every couple of years. No, there's no hard feelings there. But, you know, the way that Privateer Press goes, where it's always new, this is already a part of it. So those are the main arguments we're hearing from these things here, and so that's how it can affect the real system. Well, how does it affect you? Well, I think the main way that this might be affecting you is that there's going to be a lot of temptations in the future. One of the biggest things about releasing a new faction is that there's always a huge explosion of people wanting to get into the new faction. It's a great thing if you're a person who's just getting into the game and you want to have something unique and be like, all right, I got in at ground level. It's a great thing for people who are already in the game. We're like, all right, I've been playing Signar forever. Let's try something new. Let's try Grimkin, right? Especially if it's a limited edition type faction where they're saying, all right, just like Convergence, boom, here's pretty much everything. You might get a new update every 5 years or so, but this is pretty much it. And there's a certain amount of people out there who like that, who like the idea that, all right, my wallet is going to hurt right now, and then the hurt is going to be over. And I mean, you got to say that, I mean, this can't be not said, that for a Privateer Press, they've got to love this too, because this means every year there'll be a huge influx of money going in as everyone loves this new faction, jumps in, plays them, and of course there's those who stay with it, but like we saw with Convergence, it's like everybody Convergence, everybody out, and now there's just like those few diehards that still love Convergence. So, I mean, I'm not saying that Privateer Press is doing this just for the money. You know, the nice thing that I like to believe about Privateer Press is that they're not controlled by shareholders or anything like that, and so they're doing what they're doing to try and make the best game possible, and I feel that's more what they're after. They're not after that. They're more after trying to keep the game fresh and bring in these new factions like we saw with Cephalix and Convergence and Grimkin. It really does that, right? Bringing a brand new faction to a game brings in a lot of interest. So, given that, what should really be the path forward for this? And I think the real answer is buckle up and see what happens. You know, right now, a lot of the doom and gloom is more looking out like, just imagine what it's going to be like after 5 years or after 10 years. Well, I gotta tell you what. At the point there where we get to be like 10 years more in the future, congratulations, because that's a great feat to be lasting as a game that long. I mean, of course, we've gone on quite a long time already as War Machine as it is, but 10 more years? Like, that's a huge jump in the future. I don't know what age you are, viewers who are watching this, but let's imagine, like, how old are you, and where are you going to be in 10 years? You might not be playing War Machine anymore, so this might be a non-issue. As well, let's not assume that Privateer Press is just going to keep on flying into the sun and never try and avoid it, right? If they go down this path and they put out one new faction, and hooray, it does well. Next year, one new faction, still doing well. Next year, one new faction, but we're running out of design space, people are getting pissed off, they're going to stop, right? They're going to get that point and say, all right, let's change direction. So the idea that some of these things are so bad, because if you take them to extremes, they're super bad, well, you have to assume that Privateer Press is not going to push these things to the super extreme, so those arguments, again, are kind of non-valid. So that's really the whole issue in a nutshell. I really don't think it's something that people should really be worrying about. Do I find it interesting? Yes. Do I think there's potential problems? Sure, but it's not anything new that we haven't seen with the problems of what Privateer Press's system really has inherently anyway, so why are y'all worrying about, right? Just enjoy these new models. So there you go. If you agree, if you disagree, please let me know down below. I always love these orc tactical teams where we get to kind of like discuss these things after. So there you go. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you later. Bye.